The Ilyushin DB-3F, also known as the IL-4, was the principal Soviet medium bomber of the Great Patriotic War. When Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, Stalin planned retaliatory raids on Germany. A special long-range bomber group was formed to attack Berlin. It was based on an island off the Estonian coast and was made up of 3 squadrons of IL-4s. On August the 7th, 1941, 15 Soviet naval aviation IL-4s of the 81st Mine and Torpedo Regiment were loaded with bombs. Their mission was to make the first Soviet attack on the German capital. They were not to fly as a group, but were ordered to make their way independently to Berlin. It was an expensive gesture. Only 6 of the 15 aircraft that left the island of Saaremaa returned. But even though the losses were heavy, the mission caused Berlin's air raid sirens to sound, and Stalin ordered a larger follow-up raid for August the 11th. This time, the IL-4s were accompanied by 11 of the big PE-8s from the Special Purpose Heavy Bomber Regiment. They were fitted with diesel engines to give them the range necessary to fly to Berlin and back. It was not a good night for the PE-8s. 4 were shot down and the others had problems with their diesel engines, which were not reliable. The IL-4 had no real future as a strategic bomber. It was relatively slow and poorly armed. And when the Red Air Force formed its long-range air arm in 1942, the IL-4 was used for preliminary night bombing, softening up enemy positions for ground forces to attack. Heavy bombers had no real place in the Great Patriotic War. On the other hand, Petlyakov's PE-2 found an effective niche as a light bomber. It also earned Petlyakov his freedom from one of Stalin's prisons. Petlyakov had been working for Andrei Tupolev in 1938 when Tupolev was arrested. Stalin charged him with having sold the plans of what became the Messerschmitt fighters to Germany. It was a ridiculous allegation, but Petlyakov soon found himself joining Tupolev behind bars. Stalin at the time wanted a dive bomber. Petlyakov was able to adapt his new design for a high-altitude twin-engined fighter. The result was the PE-2, and Stalin was pleased enough with it to free Petlyakov. The PE-2 served as a frontal bomber and high-altitude fighter. One of 3 women's air regiments, the 587th, was equipped with PE-2s. Because the controls were heavy, some of the smaller women had difficulty in getting the plane off the ground. These pilots would have their navigators stand behind them on takeoff and at the right moment help pull the stick back. The PE-2 was an impressive-looking aircraft with its 56-foot wingspan and elegant lines. The first production version had 2 Klimov liquid-cooled engines of 1,100 horsepower each, giving a top speed of about 330 miles an hour. It had a crew of 3, a pilot, a navigator, and a gunner. Each crew member had an armored seat, and the belly of the aircraft was armored below the cabin. By mid-1942, there were reports of increasing casualties from attacks by Messerschmitt Bf-109Fs and the new Bf-109Gs. Many of the PE-2s in service were modified in the field to take more armor plate, a dorsal turret, and extra machine guns. It was a serviceable aircraft, but it never attained the status of its partner in the battlefield, the IL-2 Sturmovik. In 1938, Sergei Ilyushin designed what was to become the legend of the Great Patriotic War. Its pilots called it the Hunchback. Germans came to call it Der Schwarze Tod, the Black Death.